What's up, comic book enthusiasts? Well, it's been a long ride, hasn't it? This 52-week experiment of mine for this series to analyze and talk about old number ones of defunct series for 52 weeks. Apparently not in a row. There seemed to be some lack of quality as far as keeping it up. I believe this series has gone 3 years, so or 2 years. It's been a while. Matter of fact, I was disappointed that Geekvolution's Spawn Year actually beat me. And he tried. I mean, he worked on that. He wrote that. He had sets and costumes and people work on that, and he beat me. You know what I do with this? I just sit down and I read a comic, and then I sit in front of a camera. I couldn't even be bothered to do that sooner than Geekvolution's Spawn Year. Anyway, with that said, we have now finally come to the last episode of the Old 52. And what have I decided to talk about? I've decided to talk about 52. Number 1 from DC Comics. And this is a pretty historical series. And at least it's fairly important to modern comic books. And I'll get that in a second. Of course, the team on this is a team of writers and artists. For the ones who worked on this, this is written by Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, Greg Rucka, Mark Wade. The art breakdowns on this one are by Keith Griffin, and Joe Bennett did the finishes. This was a pretty important series to DC. This definitely did change kind of the direction for all their titles, even more so than the comic book event that took place for it. It was one of the Crisis. I keep forgetting, Infinite Crisis? I don't know, one of those things. And they did a thing where they jumped, after Infinite Crisis was over, they took a jump in continuity a year. And part of those questions were like, what happened to Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman during that year? And, you know, because they were in different places once we got to those new issues that took place after the jump. And, you know, some other characters as well. That was to be filled in by this, which is a series that was supposed to come out once a week for the entire year, worked on by this crew of extremely talented writers. And done almost like a TV series, because, you know, not one TV show is done by one person. It's done by a team. Yeah, it has a leader, like a showrunner, but there's a whole bunch of people who work together to make sure it you know, comes out on time and has quality and continuity and all that. So that's what they did as an experiment for this. And what was interesting was that this story, this major series in DC, didn't focus on the big three. Matter of fact, it focused mostly on some of the second stringers, like Brewster Gold, The Question, Renee Montoya, Elongated Man, and Steel. And kind of let them shine in the spotlight. This story was about the group of them. Now, you of course know that, let's see, Ralph, the elongated man, had lost his wife, Sue Denby, in the Identity Crisis storyline. He's still pretty depressed and broken up about it. Also depressed and broken up is Renee Montoya. She had recently lost her job in the Gotham City Police Department. If you had been reading the Gotham comic, let's see, it was GCPD, I believe it was. And then, of course, we go over to Steel. His, let's see, his niece or daughter, I can never remember what she was to him. And she wants to kind of make a leap on her own, and he wants her to kind of... She doesn't seem like she understands responsibility, so he kind of teaches her a valuable lesson by taking her armor away, which he gave her the armor in the first place, and tells her to really, that she needs to build her own armor if she really wants to do this. And we also do a lot of elaborate introductions, like the Black Adam's place. He is in charge of a country here in this beautiful set piece. And we get to see, you know, where he is going during this. We have, and of course, Brewster Gold. Brewster Gold is, you know, former Justice League, especially one of my favorite versions of the Justice League is the Keith Giffen Demetrius Justice League International. He has become pretty popular lately, and so popular that he has sponsorships on his costume, much like Mystery Men, but it's still a funny joke. And he's actually doing pretty well. Now, of course, those of you who may not be too familiar with Brewster Gold, Brewster Gold was a kind of a loser in the future, and he loved superheroes, especially the superheroes of our present time, wherever this is. And he decided to take a lot of tech of his time and go back in time and be a hero. Because let's face it, if you were able to get a whole bunch of cool stuff from nowadays and go back to, I don't know, the Victorian age, you'd be rocking it. You'd be a pretty heroic super technology guy. So that's what he did. And the world is kind of recovering because Superboy was lost and killed temporarily in Infinite Crisis. But hey, they totally thought that he was gone forever. You know, they can't help it. They're in this world. They're not like us. At a big group meeting publicly, Brewster is all set because Superman's going to be there and give this great speech, and he doesn't show up. And according to history, he was supposed to show up, and he doesn't. Although Clark Kent shows up, but he tells Brewster that, you know, Superman is not going to be there. So that leads Brewster onto this mystery as to what's going on. Why isn't history working out the way he's always been told it is? And also, Renee is brought. We bring Renee in. Yeah, she's become an alcoholic. She's depressed. She doesn't want to do anything. She comes home to realize that her girlfriend Daria has left her. I always knew she'd go back to Jane Lane. And feels like, hey, you know, it's kind of how it is. You know, everyone leaves me. And that's when the Question shows up. Right here. Because he's offering her a mission. And of course, this leads into Renee becoming the Question, for those of you who know. But this is where it all happens. This was a fairly exciting series, and it debuts a lot of characters that were used later in the series, as well as ideas, stories, and a lot of stuff was shot off this. Batwoman actually makes her first appearance in this series, and the connection between her and Renee also was made. Maybe one of the complaints I might have is DC has been constantly trying to repeat the success of this, and more or less failed to do so. Because we've gotten, after this, we had the infamous Countdown. We've had the Trinity story. We've had Batman Eternal. We've had that Future's End thing or something like that. More or less, a lot of these weren't very successful and popular. Fans tend to jump onto them because, oh, hey, I got to get this fixed. I got to see what's coming up next. Because we all kind of have... Fans have become somewhat of, for lack of a better term, plot fetishes. Where we got to know what's coming up next. Who cares what the actual story is we're reading? What's coming up next? How does these things fit together? And yeah, a lot of these series kind of depend on that. And they're not very interesting. And then whatever continuity they get set up, kind of just gets busted by either the next event or even maybe just, you know, within the regular series that, you know, they kind of like make these decisions like, oh, we're going to go in these directions. And then the comics either go the way they want to, or the next event kind of, you know, breaks it apart, or the next huge weekly series or whatever. With that said, this is wonderful. These are all collected. You might have fun and, you know, dig up the old back issues. I don't know how expensive they are. I assume the first Batwoman is a couple bucks. But it might be easier just to dig up the trade paperbacks. They're really good, exciting reads. And yeah, as far as all the weekly series DC has done over the last few years, this is the only one I really truly recommend. 52 is still great. Check it out if you haven't already. And I think that's it. I'm going to be doing more old comic reviews, so I'll be replacing this series with something. I'll make an announcement soon about that. I think that's it for now. I'd like to thank everybody who's been watching these for the last 80-some years. I'm sorry these took so long. I'm going to try and be more responsible as far as putting out regular content in the future. So don't forget to like and subscribe this video. Don't forget to check out the links below where you can buy Red Knight or support me on Patreon or support my wife Lindsay on Patreon. I think that's it, so push the button, Lindsay.